June 13th, 1944, 10:37 a.m. A narrow street in Carentan, France. Stone houses with dark windows like empty eyes. Shutters hanging crooked. Smoke drifting from somewhere unseen. The kind of quiet that comes right before hell breaks loose. And in the middle of that street, completely exposed, stands Lieutenant Dick Winters, leader of Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, running forward to establish an advanced position. But he's not alone in this deadly sprint. Hidden behind a low stone wall, gripping an M1919 machine gun weighing 31 pounds, is Edward "Babe" Heffron, a 21-year-old kid from South Philadelphia. Shipyard worker, guaranteed draft exemption, safe job back home. And yet, here he is. And it's in this moment that everything freezes. A burst from a German MG-42 sweeps the street. The soldier next to Babe drops. Bullet enters the forehead, exits through the back of the skull. Blood spraying across Babe's uniform. Warm, sticky, real. The body collapses into the mud with a sound that Babe will hear in his nightmares for the next 69 years. Winters keeps running, and Babe has a choice. Duck down, stay covered, protect himself, let the officer handle his own survival. Or raise that machine gun, expose his chest, his head, his shoulders to enemy fire, and lay down covering fire to save the life of the man leading his company. 2 seconds to decide. He decides. If you want to understand how a street kid from Philly became the buddy who literally carried Dick Winters on his back through the hell of World War II, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story goes way beyond what Band of Brothers showed you on TV. This is the real deal. But before we return to that street in Carentan, before we see what choice Babe makes and how it changes everything, we need to understand who this kid was, where he came from, what shaped him, what values he carried from the brick streets of South Philadelphia into the killing fields of Normandy. Because heroes aren't born wearing uniforms. They're forged in neighborhoods, in families, in friendships that run deeper than blood. So let's rewind. Let's go back to where it all started. South Philly, 1920s. A world away from war. Or so everyone thought.
South Philadelphia, the 1920s and 30s. Red brick row houses pressed tight against each other like sardines in a can. Narrow streets where kids play stickball with broomsticks and tennis balls taped together. Clotheslines stretching between buildings, laundry flapping in the industrial wind. This is working-class America, immigrant America, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, where front doors stay unlocked, where a kid mouthing off to an adult gets disciplined by any parent within earshot, then disciplined again when they get home. Edward James Heffron is born on May 16, 1923, third of 5 children. His father, Joseph Heffron, works as a corrections officer at the local penitentiary. Steady work, honest work, but not easy money, especially during the Great Depression when every dollar is stretched thinner than pie dough. His mother, Anne, runs the household with an iron fist wrapped in Catholic devotion. Every penny accounted for, every meal planned down to the last potato. Church every Sunday, no exceptions. Confession when you mess up, prayer when you need strength. And they need strength often, because this is the Depression era. Men line up at soup kitchens, families lose homes, kids go to bed hungry more often than anyone wants to admit. But the Heffron household survives. Babe, the nickname he picks up young because he's got this baby face even as he shoots up in height, grows up sharing a bed with his brothers. Hand-me-down clothes, shoes worn until the soles have holes, meals that repeat, beans, bread, whatever costs least. But poverty doesn't break them. It forges them. Babe develops a personality that becomes his signature. Loud, funny, loyal to a fault. The kind of kid who makes everyone laugh even when there's not much to laugh about. Sharp tongue, street smarts, that thick Philadelphia accent that sounds like gravel and honey mixed together. But beneath the jokes and the easy smile, there's something else. A moral compass. A sense of duty he can't quite articulate but feels deep in his bones. The understanding that you take care of your own. Always, no matter what. By age 18, Babe is working at the New York Shipbuilding Company across the river in Camden, New Jersey. His job? Sandblasting the hulls of ships being converted into light aircraft carriers for the war effort. It's brutal work, lungs full of dust and grit, hands raw from handling equipment, noise so loud you can't hear yourself think, 10-hour shifts in all weather.
But it's good money for a working-class kid. And here's the crucial detail that changes everything. Babe has a 2B draft classification, essential war industry worker. He can stay home, safe. No risk of dying on a French beach or in a frozen Belgian forest. He's doing his part for the war effort right there in Camden, converting ships that will help win the war. Most guys would take that gift and run with it, but Babe can't sleep, because the neighborhood boys are leaving. Anthony Chanfroni, Johnny Julian, J.D. Henderson, dozens of South Philly kids dropping their tools, their jobs, their girlfriends, and lining up at recruitment centers. And every time Babe sees another friend in uniform, something gnaws at him. Then comes the defining moment. Babe and his closest friends make a pact. Not just that they'll enlist together, they're going for the paratroopers, the toughest outfit in the Army, the guys who jump out of perfectly good airplanes into enemy fire. And if one of them doesn't make it back, the others will personally deliver his belongings to his family and tell them exactly what happened. No generic War Department letter. Eye to eye, hand to hand, street honor. Babe comes home that evening, sits at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg that his dad keeps meaning to fix. His father is reading the newspaper. His mother is darning socks under the lamp. "I'm enlisting," Babe says. The room goes quiet. His mother's hands stop moving. His father lowers the paper slowly. "Edward," Joseph says carefully, "you don't have to go. You've got the exemption. You're doing important work." Babe looks at his draft card on the mantel, then at the shipyard badge hanging by the door, then at his father. "But they're going, Pop, so I'm going too." 6 words. No grand speech, no patriotic rhetoric, just simple, unshakable loyalty. That's the code of South Philly. You don't abandon your brothers. Ever. November 7th, 1942. Edward Babe Heffron raises his right hand and enters the United States Army. He's 19 years old, and he has absolutely no idea that in less than 2 years, he'll be standing on a street in Carentan with a machine gun in his arms, making a split-second decision about whether an officer named Dick Winters lives or dies. Paratrooper Boot Camp. If you think basic training is hard, paratrooper training is a whole different universe of suffering. 250-foot jump towers, endless runs in full gear under the Georgia sun, push-ups until your arms feel like they're going to fall off. Discipline so brutal it borders on cruelty. Sergeants screaming inches from your face, spit flying, searching for any sign of weakness. Zero tolerance, zero mercy. Drop out any time, the door's right there. But Babe doesn't drop out, because he's not doing this alone. Johnny Julian is beside him. J.D. Henderson is right behind him, and with every run, every jump, every moment of shared torture, the pact between them grows stronger. They're not just soldiers, they're brothers. When they finally earn those silver jump wings and tuck them into their uniforms, the feeling isn't just pride, it's belonging. It's knowing you're part of something bigger than yourself, part of a brotherhood that understands what it means to put your life on the line for the man next to you. But training is one thing, war is something else entirely. Babe arrives as a replacement in Easy Company, 506th Paratroop Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division after D-Day. The company has already been baptized by fire. They've already lost men. They've already seen things Babe hasn't seen yet. And he knows everyone knows that replacements have to prove themselves. You're the new guy, the FNG. You haven't earned your place yet. So when Babe steps off that truck and sees the veterans of Easy Company, men with haunted eyes and thousand-yard stares, uniforms still stained with Normandy mud, he feels small. But then something happens that changes everything. He meets Dick Winters. Not the legend, not the officer who will one day be studied at West Point, just a calm, technical lieutenant from Pennsylvania who speaks quietly but commands with surgical precision.
First time under real fire, Babe feels his entire body lock up. Heart pounding so hard he thinks it's going to burst through his chest. Hands sweating cold. Breath coming short and fast, almost panic. But then he sees Winters stand up in the middle of incoming fire and point forward. Move! Move! And the men move. Because Winters doesn't give orders from the rear. He leads from the front. He exposes himself first. And Babe, street kid who always respected people who walk the walk, feels something shift inside him. If the lieutenant goes, I go. During one of the first patrols, a soldier falls wounded up ahead. Without thinking, Babe sprints forward under fire to try to reach him. The man is already dead, but Babe doesn't know that. He just knows he can't leave anyone behind. Wild Bill Guinaire, another South Philly kid, older, tougher, with a reputation, sees this and shouts, "Babe, you crazy son of a bitch." But he's grinning, because he just saw that Babe is cut from the same cloth. Loyalty above everything, brotherhood above fear. That night, sitting in a foxhole, Guinaire passes Babe a cigarette. "You're all right, kid," he says, "for a replacement." Coming from Wild Bill, that's basically a Medal of Honor. And that's how Babe Heffron becomes part of Easy Company. Not by being the strongest, not by being the bravest, but by being the guy you want beside you when everything falls apart. The guy who won't leave you, won't quit, won't let you die alone. Now, let's return to Carentan, to the moment that defines everything, to the narrow street, the exposed lieutenant, the 31-pound machine gun, and the choice that separates ordinary men from heroes. June 1944, Normandy, France. After the spectacular success at Brecourt Manor, where Winters leads an assault on German artillery batteries and becomes a tactical legend, Easy Company receives another mission that's almost impossible. Take Carentan. Small city between Utah and Omaha beaches, vital junction point to connect the Allied beachheads. Without Carentan, the Germans can cut supply lines and divide American forces. Simple on paper, hell in practice. Because Carentan is packed with entrenched German soldiers, elite Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, Germany's best. MG-42 machine guns that fire 1,200 rounds per minute, double the rate of American weapons. Mortars. Snipers hidden in barns, houses, church towers. And the terrain? Bocage. Fields surrounded by ancient stone walls and dense hedgerows. Every field is a trap. Every corner, an ambush. Centuries-old farming landscape turned into a defender's paradise and an attacker's nightmare. Easy Company advances slowly, meter by meter, losing men with every movement forward. And Babe is right in the middle of it all, carrying the M1919, a 31-pound machine gun, plus ammo boxes slung over his shoulders, plus his personal gear. Total weight? Over 60 pounds of equipment in the June heat. Sweat pouring down his face, lungs burning, legs screaming, but he can't stop. Because everyone depends on that machine gun. If he fails, if the gun jams, if he can't lay down covering fire when it's needed, someone dies. Maybe Guinaire, maybe Winters, maybe any of the brothers he swore to protect. That responsibility weighs more than the gun ever could. The fighting in Carentan drags on for days. June 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. House-to-house combat. German soldiers fighting from cellars and attics. American paratroopers clearing rooms with grenades and rifle fire. The smell of gunpowder, blood, and death hanging in the air like fog.
Babe sees things he'll never speak about. Friends hit, bodies torn apart by artillery, a kid from Nebraska crying for his mother as he bleeds out in a doorway, and there's nothing anyone can do. Each loss hardens something inside him, and each loss reminds him why he's here, to keep as many brothers alive as possible. Then comes the moment that tests everything he believes. June 13th. The company needs to push forward to secure a tactical position, but there's open ground between their current position and where they need to be, and the Germans have clear lines of sight. Anyone who stands up is a target.
Winters assesses the situation, studies the street, calculates angles, risks, timing, and makes a decision that defines his leadership. He'll go first. "When I move," he says calmly, "you cover, then you follow." The men exchange glances. Some nod, some just stare, because they know what this means. The officer goes first. The leader exposes himself before asking anyone else to take the risk. That's Dick Winters. That's why men follow him into hell without hesitation. Winters takes a breath, checks his weapon, and moves. He sprints across the open space, and hell erupts. The MG-42 opens fire, that distinctive sound like ripping canvas, so fast the individual shots blur into one continuous roar. Bullets chew up the cobblestones, kick up clouds of dust and pulverized stone, smack into walls with sounds like sledgehammers hitting concrete. And one of Babe's friends, a kid he trained with, a guy who promised to visit Philadelphia after the war, rises up to provide covering fire and takes a round directly through the forehead. The back of his skull explodes. Blood and brain matter spray across Babe's face, his uniform, his hands. The body drops like a puppet with cut strings. And Winters is still running, still exposed, still a target. But now there's no one with an angle to cover him, except Babe. And the choice crystallizes in that moment, sharp and clear and brutal. Stay down, stay safe, let the lieutenant handle his own survival, go home to South Philly, live a long life. Or stand up, expose yourself to the same fire that just killed your friend, risk everything for a man you've known for only a few weeks. Babe can feel his hands shaking, can feel fear crawling up his spine like ice water, can feel every survival instinct in his body screaming at him to stay down, stay hidden, stay alive. But then he looks at Winters, running, exposed, vulnerable. And he remembers every time Winters led from the front, every time he treated enlisted men like human beings instead of numbers, every time he put himself in danger first before asking anyone else to follow. He remembers the South Philly code, you take care of your own. And in that split second, Dick Winters has become his own. Babe makes his choice. He rises, lifts the M1919 into position, the weight suddenly feeling light, like the weapon is an extension of his own body, finds the German position through the iron sights, and squeezes the trigger.
The M1919 roars to life. Controlled bursts, just like they taught him in training. Tracer rounds cutting through the air like angry red hornets. Bullets slamming into the building where the Germans are positioned, punching holes in stone, shattering windows, kicking up debris. And for a few precious seconds, the incoming fire slackens, because the Germans have to duck, have to take cover, because Babe is pouring lead at them like a mechanical storm. Winters uses those seconds, covers another 10 meters, dives behind a low wall, relatively safe, for now. But Babe is still exposed, and the Germans realize it. The MG-42 swivels, searches, finds him. Babe sees the German machine gun turning, sees the barrel tracking toward him, and he knows with absolute certainty that he has less than a second before he takes a burst through the chest. So he does the only thing he can do. He keeps firing, not to run, not to hide, but to force the German gunner to flinch, to duck, to hesitate just long enough to throw off his aim. It's a bet with death itself. And Babe wins. The German burst goes high. Bullets hammer the wall behind him. Stone chips slice into his face, his neck, his hands. Blood runs hot down his jaw. But he's alive. And so is Winters. From somewhere to the left, Guarnera's voice cuts through the chaos. "Babe, get your damn head down, you maniac!" But there's pride in that voice. Respect. Because Wild Bill just witnessed something that can't be taught in any training manual.
One brother saving another. And that's exactly what separates ordinary soldiers from true heroes. Not the absence of fear, but the conscious choice to act despite it. If you're getting value from this real story, drop a comment telling me which Easy Company hero I should cover next. And stick around to the end because I'm going to show you what Band of Brothers never told you about Babe's life after the war. Babe finally drops back down behind cover, hands trembling so badly he can barely maintain grip on the weapon. Adrenaline flooding his system so intensely he feels like he might vomit, heart hammering against his ribs like it's trying to escape. But he's alive, and Winters is alive, and in this moment, that's all that matters. The rest of Easy Company uses the covering fire to advance, men sprinting in short bursts, diving into cover, moving forward using Babe's machine gun as an invisible shield. This is what infantry combat actually looks like. Not Hollywood heroics, not one man taking out an entire platoon single-handed. Just small actions, covering fire, tactical movement, each soldier doing his job so others can do theirs. But those small actions, they save lives. Minutes later, when the immediate situation stabilizes, Winters low crawls over to Babe's position, looks at the 21-year-old kid covered in blood, from his dead friend, from his own wounds, from the violence of the last 5 minutes, and says 3 words. "Good job, Heffron." That's it. 3 words. But for Babe, those words carry more weight than any medal, any commendation, any official recognition ever could. Because they come from a man he respects more than any general with stars on his collar. From someone who leads by example, not by rank. And in that moment, something profound clicks into place for Babe. He's not here for flag or country, not here for politicians or territory on maps, not even here for abstract concepts like freedom or democracy. He's here for the men beside him, for Wild Bill, for Winters, for Johnny Julian and J.D. Henderson and every other brother who shares this hell. And if protecting them means exposing himself, if it means carrying 31 pounds of machine gun under enemy fire, if it means making a split-second choice between safety and sacrifice, he'll make that choice every single time, without hesitation. That's what makes him a hero, not a dramatic movie scene, not an inspiring speech, but the repeated decision, day after day, to place his brothers' lives above his own. Over the next months, Babe will make that decision dozens more times. In Holland, during Operation Market Garden, when Easy Company parachutes behind enemy lines to seize key bridges. In Bastogne, during the brutal winter siege in the Ardennes, when they hold the line against German panzers without adequate supplies, without heat, without hope. And each time, he carries that machine gun. Each time, he provides covering fire for his brothers. Each time, he chooses loyalty over fear. But the cost accumulates, because war doesn't let anyone walk away whole. Every firefight takes a piece of your soul. Every dead friend carves out a chunk of your humanity. Every moment of terror leaves scar tissue on your psyche. And Babe will carry Carentan and all the other battles on his shoulders for the rest of his life. In his dreams, he'll stand in that street forever, watching his friend's head explode, feeling the machine gun buck in his hands, seeing Winters run through his sights.
The war ends in May 1945, but for Babe Heffron, it never really ends at all.
Babe Heffron survives Carentan, survives Operation Market Garden in Holland, where Easy Company drops into Eindhoven and fights through Dutch towns and farmland, survives Bastogne, the most brutal siege of the European War, where Easy Company is surrounded by superior German forces in -20 degrees Fahrenheit weather, dug into frozen foxholes, watching friends die from artillery, cold, and hopelessness. But surviving doesn't mean escaping unscathed. Babe is wounded in combat, takes shrapnel from a German grenade, fragments of hot metal embedded in his flesh. Purple Heart awarded. The physical wounds eventually heal in a field hospital, but the psychological wounds? Those never close completely. Chronic insomnia, waking up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, convinced he's still in that foxhole in Bastogne, hearing the whistle of incoming German mortars, recurring nightmares, the faces of dead friends, the kid from Nebraska crying for his mother, the soldier whose skull exploded right next to him in Carentan, hands that tremble when lighting a cigarette, jumping violently at loud noises, a 1,000-yard stare when someone asks a simple question and he's 1,000 miles away, back in that street, back in that moment of choice. Survivor's guilt. Why did I make it when he didn't? The question that millions of veterans carry, the question with no answer, the invisible weight that crushes more surely than any physical burden. But Babe keeps going, because the brothers still depend on him, because Wild Bill is right there beside him, wounded too, but still cracking South Philly jokes to maintain sanity, because Winters continues to lead with that same calm under pressure, reminding everyone why they fight, and because quitting would betray the pact with the South Philly boys, the pact with the men who fell, the pact to honor every lost life by continuing to fight, continuing to survive, continuing to remember. Babe moves through the rest of the war as a divided soul. Part of him is still the joking kid from Philly. Part of him died in Carentan, in Bastogne, in every field where he left a piece of his innocence behind. May 1945. The war in Europe ends. Easy Company, what's left of it, reaches Hitler's eagle's nest in the Bavarian Alps, symbolically the end. But for Babe, the end of the war is just the beginning of a different battle. The battle to go home and pretend everything's fine. The battle to act normal when nothing feels normal anymore. The battle to sleep without dreaming of death. The battle to carry the invisible machine gun, the memories, the faces of the dead, the sound of MG-42s that he can never put down. When he finally steps off the train in South Philadelphia, seeing those familiar red brick streets, the row houses, kids playing stickball, he realizes something devastating. His body came home, but part of his soul stayed forever on that narrow street in Carentan. South Philadelphia, 1945. Babe Heffron is home, but he doesn't feel at home. The streets are the same, the houses unchanged, even the faces are familiar. But he's different, and the city doesn't understand the war he carries inside. So he does what millions of veterans do, buries it deep, puts on a smile, and goes back to work. First job, Publicker Industries, whiskey distillery on South Delaware Avenue, working with barrels, checking production lines, clothes perpetually soaked with the smell of alcohol. And the best part? Wild Bill Guarniere works there too. The two South Philly boys who survived hell together, now working side by side in peace. Old jokes, shared memories that no one else would understand,
comfortable silences between men who don't need to explain anything to each other. They worked together for nearly 20 years. When Publicker moves operations to Linfield in 1966, Babe decides to stay in Philly. He gets a job on the Philadelphia waterfront, checking cargo, doing clerical work on the docks, and he stays there for the next 27 years. Retirement in 1993. Simple life. No glamour, no spotlight. Babe marries, builds a family, goes to Mass every Sunday like his mother taught him, has dinner with Wild Bill and their families every month, and almost never talks about the war. His own family doesn't fully understand what he lived through until decades later, when Stephen Ambrose publishes Band of Brothers in 1992 and the HBO series explodes in 2001. Suddenly, people on the street recognize Babe, want autographs, want to hear war stories, and he, always humble, always uncomfortable with the word hero, says the same thing every time. I just did what anyone would have done, took care of my brothers. But in 2007, something changes. Babe and Guarniere, along with writer Robin Post, publish Brothers in Battle, Best of Friends, a memoir, not about glorious battles, but about friendship, about loyalty, about two South Philly boys who went to hell and came back, one without a leg, one without sleep, but still together. The book becomes a bestseller, and finally, after 60 years, Babe can release what he's carried: the memories, the nightmares, the guilt, the gratitude, the pain, the brotherhood. In one interview, he says something that summarizes his entire life.
Every June, we think of D-Day. Every September, we think of Holland. Every December, we think of Bastogne. The war never left him, but he learned to carry it with dignity. At the end of episode 10 of Band of Brothers, Babe appears as himself, aged veteran, face marked by time and memory, eyes that saw things no young man should see. And he says, voice soft but steady, "We were just ordinary guys doing extraordinary things." He attends Easy Company reunions, sees the surviving brothers aging, their numbers shrinking each year, stands with them for memorial photographs, salutes fallen friends. And every time he insists he wasn't special, just lucky, just doing his job, just taking care of his own. But everyone who knows the full story, everyone who understands what happened on that street in Carentan, knows better. December 1st, 2013, Edward Babe Heffron dies in Philadelphia, 90 years old, surrounded by family, at peace. But his legacy continues, because he proved something fundamental about heroism. Heroes aren't born. Heroes choose. They choose loyalty over fear. They choose their brothers over themselves. They choose to stand up when it would be easier to stay down. And sometimes, that choice happens on a narrow street in France, with a 31-pound machine gun, and a lieutenant running under fire, and 2 seconds to decide between safety and sacrifice. Babe chose sacrifice, and Dick Winters lived. And because Winters lived, he led Easy Company through the rest of the war, saving countless more lives with his tactical brilliance and calm leadership. The ripple effect of one choice, one moment, one South Philly kid deciding that his brothers matter more than his own survival. That's the real story of Babe Heffron. Not the Hollywood version, the true version, the one that deserves to be remembered. 3 lessons Babe Heffron left us. First, loyalty conquers fear. Babe had a draft exemption, could have stayed home safe, working in essential industry, contributing to the war effort without risking his life. But his friends were going, and for him, abandoning his brothers was unthinkable. That same loyalty drove him to expose himself under fire to save Winters in Carentan. It wasn't fearlessness. It was the conscious choice to place others above himself. That's real courage. Second, invisible heroism sustains visible leadership. Winters is the famous face, the legendary leader studied at West Point, the officer with the HBO series. But he could only lead because men like Babe provided covering fire, because machine gunners risked their lives to keep him alive. The hero isn't always the face on the poster. Sometimes it's the machine gunner you barely notice, saving lives in the background. Recognize the Babes in your life. Honor the invisible heroes who make everything else possible. Third, true victory is the brotherhood that survives hell. Babe and Wild Bill worked together for decades after the war, had dinner together, laughed together, wrote a book together. The friendship that started on the streets of Philly survived Carentan, Bastogne, the Eagle's Nest, and continued until the very end. That's the victory that actually matters. Not territory captured or enemies killed, but the bonds that prove stronger than death itself. Invest in relationships that can survive anything. What Band of Brothers didn't show. The HBO series focuses on Winters, Sobel, Spears. Babe appears, but often as a supporting character. The reality? He was essential in Carentan, Market Garden, Bastogne. The book Brothers in Battle, Best of Friends contains raw, funny, tragic stories that HBO condensed or cut for time. The life on the docks, the decades of nightmares, the South Philly humor that kept him sane, the daily struggle to live with memories no one else could understand. This video exists to deepen what the screen didn't have time to tell, to honor the full story of a man who never called himself a hero, but absolutely was one. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Which Easy Company hero should I cover next? Hit subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. And share this video, because men like Babe Heffron deserve to be remembered for more than just a TV show. The war ended in 1945, but the brotherhood? That never dies. And the lessons Babe taught us? Those are eternal. Be loyal. Cover your brothers. Choose sacrifice over safety when it matters. That's how ordinary guys do extraordinary things.